Thank you very much. Very, very kind words. And I'm delighted to be participating today in this second webinar. I too would like to just acknowledge I'm calling in from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen speaking people here on Vancouver Island. Today they are the Esquimalt First Nation and the Songhees First Nation, and their relationship with the land continues to this day. And I'm proud to acknowledge myself as a guest on those territories. Just over 2 weeks ago, the Government of Canada in their throne speech acknowledged, to the surprise of many of us, that they will bring forward a disability inclusion plan that will include a new Canadian disability benefit, one modeled after the guaranteed income supplement for seniors. Now, what does that actually mean, or what could it mean? And I think that's the purpose of today's webinar, is to share ideas and aspirations as to what those few words in the throne speech could actually mean in practice for Canadians with disabilities. Let me begin by just sharing some of my assumptions or hopes of how I interpret that short sentence in the throne speech. I take it to mean a commitment to a new permanent income support program at the federal level, a pan-Canadian national program, a program that will be focused on low income to modest or moderate income individuals and families living with disabilities. A program that will be modeled after the old age security and guaranteed income supplement programs for seniors. Not just the GIS, the guaranteed income supplement, but the combined old age security guaranteed income supplement package. That's important because the income guarantee is much more significant when you combine looking at those two programs together. I also take the notion of it being modeled after the guaranteed income supplement in the sense of following the example of those programs, but not simply copying or mimicking all of the design elements of the old age security and guaranteed income supplement. There's some good features of those programs, but there's other features that I think we can do better and we can improve upon. And there's also some promising practices in other programs that we could probably adopt or adapt for the purposes of this new Canada disability benefit. Now, since that statement in the throne speech, Minister Carla Qualtrough, the federal minister responsible for disability inclusion, and certainly the minister who will be introducing this legislation when it comes to establish this new benefit, since the announcement, she has said that this program is intended for people in the working age population. In other words, people typically from about age 18 to 64. Which raises some questions as to what will happen for children with disabilities under the age of 18, and certainly what will happen to seniors living with disabilities ages 65 and up. But for my opening remarks, I will focus on what Minister Qualtrough has said so far about the focus of the population group that she's thinking about in terms of 18 to 64. I also take the throne speech commitment to mean that this new program is not, at least in the short term, going to be introduced in a way that will eliminate or it's to replace other existing programs, but that it will, at least in the short term or in the medium term future, it will be introduced and be embedded within the existing tapestry or landscape of programs we currently have across the country. And that's the way the GIS was introduced back in the late 1960s. The last thing I interpret the throne speech to mean, and I know this from Minister Qualtrough saying this herself, and Rabia just said it very eloquently as well, is that the disability communities and groups will have further opportunities for meaningful engagement and to contribute to the discussions as to what the specific design elements should be of this program. Both before the legislation is passed and I'm sure after the legislation is passed as to the details of the delivery. So as Rabia said a minute ago, nothing about us without us, I think will be a strong commitment, certainly by Minister Qualtrough as she goes forward on this. And I'm delighted to be part of this webinar as an opportunity organized by Plan and so many other organizations so quickly, just a few weeks after the throne speech commitment. Now, what could be some of the objectives of this new Canada Disability Benefit? Well, let me suggest 3 or 4. One is to provide a guaranteed adequate income for working age persons with disabilities across the country. The second objective would be that this program be a broad-based or comprehensive inclusive program offering financial support to individuals with any kind of disabilities who live in low to moderate income circumstances. And the third objective would be that this program will offer incentives for employment, not disincentives, to enable those who are willing and able to work to engage meaningfully real work for real pay and not at the cost of the benefit. And I can talk more about that in a minute. A fourth and longer term objective, I would think for many people, is to hope that this new benefit could be the beginning of a longer journey towards replacing provincial and territorial social assistance programs for everybody, so that we move towards ultimately a new comprehensive basic income. But in the short term, our focus here today is on a new Canadian disability benefit. There's the all-important question of eligibility. Who might or who would qualify? Who would we like to see qualify? Well, again, as I say, the minister has at least signaled that the thinking so far by herself and her government is to focus on working age population of Canadians, 18 to 64. I would suggest that the definition of disability to be used in this benefit be guided by the language in the Accessible Canada Act, passed last year by Parliament unanimously. As you may know, it was the only piece of legislation passed in the last Parliament that was unanimously supported by all political parties. I would hope that the Canadian Disability Benefit would similarly receive all party support in this minority Parliament. This should not be a partisan issue. This should not be something about party politics. This should be something that all parliamentarians can get behind to really truly tackle the deep poverty that is inflicted on so many Canadians with disabilities. There should not be any employment test to this program. You should not have to have had any labor force attachment. Whether you do or not should be irrelevant to your accessing and being eligible for the program. And if you do get employment or you are in an employed circumstance, there should be a very generous earnings exemption on an annualized basis. I'm suggesting of at least $12,000 a year. Now, in most provinces, the earnings exemption for provincial welfare or for PWD or ODSP or AISH or whatever else you want to call it in your province, the earnings exemption in most provinces is quite low. It's a matter of $2,000 or $3,000 a year, maybe $4,000 or $5,000. In BC, we have a fairly generous earnings exemption for people on disability assistance. There's no reason why a federal benefit should also have a very generous earnings exemption where you should not have to worry about taking employment and worry about losing any of your benefit. There also should be no residency requirement. Other than being a legal resident in Canada, there should be no reason that you have to have had 5 years or 10 years or whatever amount of time residing in one province or another or in the country as a whole. This will add to the sense of mobility or portability of the benefit, that the benefit would follow you wherever you happen to go. If you move across jurisdictions from one province to another, there should be no anxiety or worry about losing eligibility or the value of your benefit. The benefit should also be indexed to inflation, like the GIS and OAS are, and quarterly adjusted, like the OAS and GIS, every 3 months. In other words, it would help to maintain the purchasing power of the benefit over time. If you look by contrast to the way provincial disability assistance programs have fared over the last 10 to 20 years, in almost all provinces, the value of the benefit has declined. In only one province has it kept up or exceeded the cost of living over the last 20 years, where we have indexed benefits. A national benefit should be indexed and adjusted quarterly, and it should be a generous benefit. The population to be covered. The number of Canadians with disabilities between the ages of 18 and 64, number around about 4.1 million, maybe 4.2 million people. Now we hear a lot about the number 6.2 million Canadians with disabilities, 1 in 5. That's including younger people and seniors. So if we're looking at a benefit that's targeting at 18 to 64, we're looking at an overall population of potentially 4 to 4.2 maybe million people. So the question is how inclusive this program will be against that population benchmark, something to keep in mind. And we know that many of those people, 4.2 million, are not employed at all. Some are employed full-time. Some have a very tenuous attachment to the labor force. The benefit should also be non-taxable, like the GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, so that what you receive is actually what you get to keep. Again, no surprises there. And there also should be, as I said, a benefit, finally, another benefit should be paid on an individual income basis, not tested on family income. Every individual should get it in their own right. And if you're a couple and you both happen to have a disability and you qualify for the benefit, you both should get a full benefit to the maximum that you are personally entitled to. There should not be a blended, oh, the family is a couple, you get 80% of what 2 people would get, or a deduction. It should not be based on family income. We should recognize individual needs. We also should not create barriers for people to form intimate relationships where they may fear that if they join into a partnership or a spousal or marriage, that they're going to lose some of their benefit. That's not what this should be about. This should be to acknowledge, and it should also empower people who may be in an abusive relationship to be able to leave that circumstance, again, without fear of any financial penalty or loss of adequate income. This will be a major point of discussion, I would think, going forward in Parliament. Now let's get to the all-important question of how much. It's like when my students look at a course outline, they want to know, well, what am I getting graded on and how much is the exam worth? How much is this benefit, or should it be? Well, let's look at some potential benchmarks to think about. If it was to follow the Old Age Security Guaranteed Income Supplement model, you'd be looking at a benefit of a little over $1,500 a month. That's not good enough. If we look across the provinces as to what's the highest rate of disability income assistance provided by a provincial government, it's in Alberta, and it's the Assured Income for the Severely Handicapped program, AISH. That comes in a little under $1,700 a month, and that's the high watermark, the most generous benefit in the country across the provincial welfare programs. That's certainly not good enough. The Ontario government launched a basic income pilot by the previous government. The Kathleen Wynne Liberal government launched a basic income experiment. For persons with disabilities who were a single person, that pilot for a basic income experiment was offering people just over $1,900 a month. That's not good enough. And during the COVID crisis, we've seen the Canada Recovery Benefit, the Emergency Response Benefit, and we now see with employment insurance in a legislation just passed last week in the House of Commons, an income floor of $2,000 a month. And as many people on this call know, Canadians with disabilities, a lot did not get any access to $2,000 a month. What they're being offered is a one-time $600 payment coming later this month. That's not good enough. I'm suggesting that the minimum floor should be $2,200 a month. There should be an acknowledgement of the additional costs and barriers faced by many Canadians with disabilities. If $2,000 a month is the floor for Canadians in general, for the EI or for the CERB or the other response benefits, it should be at least $2,000 with some additional premium to recognize the additional costs of living for people with disabilities. So I'm suggesting, and we can all have fun with numbers, an assured income floor of $2,200 a month. And that would be to aim to provide at least a reasonable level of assistance and to recognize that people with disabilities have additional costs of everyday living. Now, the other key feature of the design of a program will be, if it's to follow the OAS and the Guaranteed Income Supplement, is that it will be income tested. It will be so there'll have to be much thought around how high of an income does it go up the income scale into the middle to the upper middle income groups. Obviously, the higher it goes up, the more money will have to be allocated to fund the program. How many people may get the full benefit of if it was the number I'm suggesting of $2,200 a month, and how many people will get a partial payment because they have other income. Maybe they have a pretty good job, but they will get some benefit from the Canada Disability Benefit. So there'll be a sliding scale. So if 4 million people are eligible, not all 4 million people will get the full benefit. Some will have other sources of income, other employment income, et cetera, where it would be counted as income against the income test. Now, there'll have to be some discussions as to what counts as income and what's exempted for the calculation. Again, good discussions there. And then there's going to have to be some discussions with the provinces that they do not claw back or offset this new federal Canada Disability Benefit. And that will mean some hard talk and some tough negotiations, because we've seen through COVID that very few provinces stepped up to help Canadians with disabilities with income support. And many stepped up and clawed back federal benefits. So it has not been a very reassuring year so far on the intergovernmental federal provincial front for seeing how a federal benefit may be treated by provincial governments. There will have to be, we need to then mobilize not only towards our federal politicians, but towards our provincial politicians wherever we live to make that basic claim. This is a benefit not to be offset, not to be clawed back. This is not an opportunity to offload or to play politics. This needs to be a benefit, just like the Guaranteed Income Supplement and Old Age Security. It flows dollar for dollar to the Canadians who deserve it and are entitled to it. And so that will require and test Minister Qualtrough and her abilities, but we need to provide a clear signal through to the government and to the Parliament of Canada and to provincial governments. Don't touch the benefit. Let it go to the people that need it. If they deserve it, they are entitled to it. So that will be an interesting discussion across, and a challenge, quite frankly, across many governments who are confronted with all sorts of other issues right now. So let me just conclude by saying that the vision I see that is within our reach. We have an opportunity here to have the most significant reform and income support for Canadians with disabilities since the 1960s, since when the Canada Assistance Plan was launched and the Canada Pension Plan and the Canada Pension Plan Disability Benefits were brought in the late 1960s. This could be that historic. This could be in 50 or 60 years, the most significant advance. So I'm looking for a vision that will be an adequate national program for millions of Canadians with disabilities that will significantly reduce their poverty, encourage employment in a positive way, recognize individual needs, be dignity enhancing with an adequate income. And so I'll stop there and thank you for the opportunity. These are exciting times, they're challenging times, but with that throne speech announcement, we've got time. I'm so pleased that Plan Institute and others were able to organize so quickly these two webinars. the dialogue needs to continue, and I'm so pleased to be part of it. Thank you very much.